I caught my husband cheating, but what I discovered next shocked me. I believed I was the luckiest woman alive. I was a quiet fabric artist who spent my days restoring vintage textiles. My husband, Julian, was the charismatic CEO of a rising luxury fashion brand. Our love felt intense and unbreakable. He called me his muse, and I believed every word. Then Maya Lin arrived. Maya was a billionaire investor who promised to fund Julian's dream of building a global fashion empire. The moment I met her, something felt wrong. The air between us was heavy. Julian started working late almost every night. The warm, passionate evenings we once shared slowly turned cold and distant. One evening, unable to ignore my growing doubts, I drove to our private cabin in the woods to surprise him. Instead, I discovered my worst nightmare. Through the window, I saw Julian and Maya wrapped in each other's arms. The betrayal hit me so hard that I could barely breathe. I stumbled backward into the freezing snow, hoping for air as panic crushed my chest. That night, I ended up alone in a cheap roadside motel, physically sick from the heartbreak. My entire world had shattered, but that heartbreak was only the beginning. The next day, while secretly packing my belongings from Julian's office, I found a folder named with my mother's name. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were years of emails, contracts, and voice recordings. That's when I learned the horrifying truth. My mother's sudden death years ago wasn't the tragedy I thought it was. Julian had known she was preparing to expose him for stealing her designs. He secretly paid people to bury the evidence and destroy her reputation after her death. But that wasn't the worst part. In one recording, Julian laughed with a business partner and said that I was never the target. My mother's designs were. Marrying me was just the easiest way to get them. I listened to the recording 3 times, hoping I had heard it wrong. I hadn't. The man I had loved for years had planned our relationship before we even met. Everything I thought was real had been a lie. It had all been part of a business strategy. Angry, broken, and desperate for answers, I confronted Maya. That's when the second twist shattered everything I thought I knew. Maya wasn't in love with Julian either. Years ago, Julian had destroyed her family's business, driving her father into financial ruin. She had entered his life for one reason, to get close enough to destroy him from the inside. The woman I thought was my enemy wasn't my enemy at all. She was another victim. Together, Maya and I formed an unlikely alliance. Months later, during Julian's biggest fashion launch, surrounded by media from around the world, the giant screens behind him suddenly changed. Instead of showcasing his newest designs, they displayed proof of his crimes, fraud, theft, forged documents, and the stolen designs that had built his empire. The room fell silent. Maya and I walked into the hall together, wearing matching crimson dresses, and watched as Julian's perfect world collapsed around him. Minutes later, police officers placed him in handcuffs and led him away. For the first time in years, I felt free. Months later, while Julian sat behind bars, I began rebuilding my life. The pain hadn't disappeared completely, but it no longer controlled me.